Okay, I should be recording. If that bothers anyone, please let me know. I guess I should ask that before I started recording, but I digress. We'll go ahead and get started. I think it's recording. I hope it's recording. We'll find out in a second. I don't even know what it's recording. So hopefully it's the presentation. So like I said, welcome to Research Administration. That's what we're going to talk about today. And this is a brief welcome. And it's kind of the introduction to Research Administration, but to AU as well. So today we're going to talk about what Research Administration is, who's all involved in that process, a high level of how it works, and quite honestly, a high level of why it works. And then we'll talk about the first part of the research process, which is proposal phase. We'll go briefly into that. Because really this first session is supposed to be an overview and for us to understand kind of where we are, who we are, what we're doing, and why we're doing it. So that's what we'll go over today. And so first up, what is sponsored research and why we need it, right? We are all here because we deal with sponsored research in some capacity, or we will deal with sponsored research in some capacity. And the charge that we've really been given for sponsored research comes right out of our strategic plan. It comes right from the president, and it's basically the mission of the organization. And so when we look at research administration, we tie it to the vision, the mission, and the values of AU. And so all of these three things are actually pulled from the strategic plan. But our mission as an organization is to advance knowledge, foster intellectual curiosity, build community, and empower lives of purpose, service, and leadership. Normally, I won't read a slide, but I read that because it is verbatim. I don't want to change what our mission is as an organization. But that to advance knowledge piece is huge. And that's huge for us because that's what research does, right? And so with everything that we're doing, with our values, with our vision as an organization, with our mission, research administration sits right in the middle of that. And so how do we play into that? When we're looking at the mission and the vision of the organization, there are two components that we're dealing with, right? We're an educational institution. Education is definitely first. Education is first and foremost, but in addition to that education, and as a part of that education, we also do research. That's where our students are learning. They get to figure out different things and do different things. And our faculty members are continuing to learn, to understand, to figure out things through the veins of research. And so education and research are two of the main ways we accomplish our mission as an educational institution. All right. We know what education is. And so when we talk about research, we're talking about the systematic study towards scientific knowledge. And so that's the overarching research, regardless of where the funding comes from for it or how we pay for it. It is a systematic study to gain more knowledge, more understanding scientifically on any subject, topic, thought. I actually had a great thought this morning. I'm not going to talk about it because that's not what we're here for. But I was like, this would be an awesome research project, right? And that's what we're doing. And so for research itself, it's the learning, it's the knowledge in a systematic format. And so research administration is really just all of the components that come together to facilitate the research that's happening, right? And so unlike a Google search, right, which most people think can be research these days, it's not. There's not much systematic process when it comes to searching Google. But when our individuals who are dealing with research come together to go through that systematic process, to enter into that research world, a lot of processes kick off. A lot of things have to happen on the back end, on the front end. And so in order to facilitate the research, the actual research, research administration happens to assist. Right. And so we're doing all of the things like this slide is saying, the policies, the procedures, the structures. Basically, it's everything that happens around the scene so that research can happen. And that's typically where we are. And so these are all of the phases, all of the things that are happening. So everything that you just saw on that previous screen, policies, procedures, the processes, all the little intricate things that have to happen to facilitate research. All of that is happening in one of these areas, right? And so for the research to happen, an idea has to exist. Like I said, I came up with a great one this morning. Probably not going to apply that systematic approach, but I did come up with a great idea this morning. And so what I could do with my idea is I could go out and try to find funding for it. I could find someone to say, hey, I have a great idea for research. This is going to be awesome. It's going to help the world. Could you pay for it? And if I go out and I find funding, which means I'm going to have to prepare for them a proposal, because nobody just gives you money because you have a great idea. I mean, well, they do, but not in this capacity. You got to talk really well for that. But they would say, I don't know, that may be a great idea. Why don't you tell me more about it? And so tell me more about it, I'd have to prepare a proposal. And in our instance, since we are an organization, that proposal has to go through a review process, because we want to make sure we're not obligating the organization to something that we cannot commit to, right? And so in that process, I'm going to prepare a proposal, and then I'm going to process that internally, send that around to all of the areas who are looking for specific things to make sure, yes, this is great. Yes, we can do this. Yes, this is a part of our mission, our vision. Yes, we can actually, that is how much it's going to cost to get this done. Or sometimes, no, you kind of missed the mark on that one. We need to adjust here. And once all of that is set, then this proposal is great. You can send it out. Again, if it was just me, I could do it however I want. But because I'm working with an organization, I do have to make sure I'm in line with the organization as well. And so I create that proposal, I get it submitted through all of our internal areas. I send it out to the funder to say, hey, what do you think about my idea, my plan, how much it's going to cost, would you help? And they say, absolutely, we're going to give you some money for that. And so that's when we would accept an award. And I say we, again, organization. So they are going to send that in. They're not sending that in directly to me because I'm an organization. I'm in an organization. I went from that standpoint. But they're going to say, yes, absolutely. They're going to send that into AU, and then all of the AU departments, again, who are involved in supporting me and helping me to kind of make sure my idea comes to life. All of them are going to kick in. They're going to read through the award itself and say, oh, this is fabulous. Yes, this is exactly what we agreed to. Or they could say, this isn't really what we agreed to. And I know this is what we proposed, but based on your terms, we need to make a few adjustments. And so they're going to work with the funder to make those adjustments. Ultimately, we're going to say yes. That's the goal. Yes. Thank you for supporting my research. Now I am going to go and try to figure out if my idea is going to work. And I'm actually going to perform that systematic process to advance scientific knowledge. I'm going to go through all of those steps. Different here, the faculty members, the individuals who actually do research, they know what all of those are. We are facilitating the process. And so we are all these little bubbles, right? The project gets set up from our office, actually from Laura's office. And then the faculty members, or me in this case, I get to go and perform my research and figure out if my great idea actually is going to help the world. And if it isn't, I'll figure that out too, and I'll be able to tell them why, which in contrast will still help the world. And then we'll go out and we'll get our money, right? Because the funder said they really liked the idea and they wanted to pay for it. And of course, We want them to pay for it. Quite honestly, the biggest part of what we're doing, because research and education are going to happen at the organization. So our goal is to have as many people as possible pay for that research and that education so that we don't have to pay for that research and education. That frees our funds up to do other things as an organization and continue to grow and invest in our students, faculty members, our employees. And so as much as we can free up by having others pay in, that's as much as we're going to look for. Right. And so we're going to make sure we get those payments in. That's also part of Laura's department. And then once I'm done and I've finished my report, because at an educational organization, typically the research results in a report, in some type of research paper, information that does advance knowledge. And I submit it to the sponsor so they can see this is what you've paid for and this is awesome and this is how it helps. We close that out and we start all over again. Maybe McKinsey comes up with an idea and McKinsey says, you know what? I think I have an awesome idea. I'm going to find funding. It is literally a loop. It is a circle. And we keep doing it. And sometimes we do it simultaneously. Most times it's done simultaneously. Different faculty members, everyone on this call could actually have a great idea, and we can go and try to find funding for it, write those proposals, and the process would be the same. All of this working together is research administration. Right? So then externally funded, well, the previous slide said something about an externally funded sponsored award, because that's what research administration is. It's the support for research, and in our capacity for an externally funded research award, sponsored award. And what is that? It means the money comes from outside. That's pretty much it. Assistance provided from an outside source from the organization, meaning AU is not paying for it. Some sponsor outside of the institution is paying for it. So the research enterprise is constantly fluctuating. Policies change, sponsors, institutions, the amount of research that we do and the amount that it costs really does, like, it's a lot. It costs a lot to do research. It costs a lot to perform education, right? To give education, to educate those. We're paying for several things, not just employees, but we're paying for the building itself, right? Where we're doing research at. The working travel, right? You have to go different places, do different things, technology, a lot of research, especially during COVID, everything we were doing was online, right? And so the cost of research is expensive. Right now at AU, our biggest revenue driver is tuition. And so what that means is, as long as students are enrolling and paying for school, we have money, we have funds to operate as an organization. Well, if there's a dip in tuition, right, then our funding kind of fluctuates with that dip. And so we want to offset as much as possible having one main revenue stream. And so when we get in funding for research, that offsets that a little bit, right? That reduces the amount that we're dependent on tuition, so that now we're getting more funds from the other side. Like I said earlier, education and research, those are really, that's where we're getting our money for. So if somebody's going to give us money, they can give us a donation. We do have investments. Investments are typically tied toward doing this mission or doing this part of your vision, but that's still education and research. And so regardless of whether the money is coming in for education, for donations and investments, or research, those are two veins. The biggest driver is tuition. The next driver is going to be external funding. And external funding comes in, again, for both education and research. Typically, we are looking for the external funding that comes for research, because that's what we do in research administration. And that can come from several places. And so we get it from other universities, we get it from the federal government is a big part of where we get our external funding from. We get it from private corporations, state and local governments, and foreign entities as well. And so we may partner with another university, right, in order to, and they will pay for part of what we're doing as a part of our research. It's very possible, happens all the time. And so we are constantly looking for partners with to get that external funding, which supports our research. That is what an externally funded sponsored award is. A lot of these words are interchangeable: sponsored award, research, or sponsored research. Like a lot of them, you'll hear all kinds of words, but they typically mean the same thing. We're getting money from outside to pay for what we're doing inside. That you can just sum it all up to that. Okay, so who's all involved in research administration? Anybody? Can anybody think of departments in an organization that would be involved in research administration?
The schools themselves?
The colleges themselves.
I mean, this might be a little bit of a long shot, but I mean, you fall under like the controller's office. So like, I would assume that the controller and accounting offices have something to do with that.
Controller office, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the the colleges have their own people as well. Like College of Arts and Sciences, I'm on the pre-award team, so it starts with the faculty. They're involved developing the proposals for research, and that's what sort of we're helping them to do. And then if it's accepted, then it can move on to, the central office, you guys, OSARA, and then it comes back to the schools too. They have their own grant administrators. So there's a lot of people involved.
Agreed. I don't even know why I need to give this training. So yes, everyone you just said. And so when you talk about the colleges, those are here. And under the provost office, this is actually the whole university in a nutshell. That's what this is. That's what this org chart is. And all of the colleges are here. So the areas that are highlighted in red right now are all involved in research directly, right? And so it's all of the colleges, all of them, from the research administrators to the faculty members, everyone who's involved basically in performing the research, assisting with the research is either here or here, as you said, the VP and controller's office, right? And OSARA is a bit tricky. And so I'll show you what that looks like, because part of OSARA is here in the Office of Research. And then the other part of OSARA is here in the controller's office. And so the red highlights are everyone who's directly involved. But then we also have blue highlights, because these are also individuals who you may not think are involved in research, but they are. Right. And so we have the Office of General Counsel, because quite honestly, everything that comes in is legal. Right. And so we're looking at these contracts and we're reading the contractual terms. Terms and conditions are legal, and so they're legally binding. And sometimes we have to go to the Office of General Counsel and work with them on the contracts that we're receiving. Communications, marketing, helping the researchers with their websites, what their websites are going to look like, because some have individual websites, some have center websites. And so the communications department is huge in assisting with research. The assistant VP and treasurer, we are getting funds in, so we do work with them quite a bit. And then also external affairs. And so human resources, we all know that's a huge part of research. A lot of what we're doing with research involves humans. It involves our faculty members who have to get paid. HR is processing all of those payments, right? And so research really does sit in the center of basically the organization, and we touch everyone. And so at any given time, we're talking to everyone in the organization about something. Accounts payable, hey, this invoice went out to pay a consultant who we hired to help with this part of research. And so you're talking with accounts payable. Procurement, I need to write this contract. It needs to go out. I need you to sign it. You need to review it. And we can just be talking to everybody. HR, somebody's labor was not charged correctly. It needs to hit the grant. It didn't, it wasn't set up. We need to fix it. And so we can just be talking to anyone and everyone, or just getting information. We need to know how this process works. And, you know, how do I go about setting up a website as a research subject? Because I need to as a researcher, because I need to display the research I'm doing so that I could hopefully get more funding to support the research that I'm doing, right? And so maybe I need to talk with communications. I need to talk with UCM, University Communications and Marketing. So all of these red or blue are supporting research directly or indirectly, and quite honestly, a few others. But these are the main ones that we'll deal with. The major players, those are the ones that were in those red boxes, are here. And so even though it looks like I just threw some bubbles on the screen, we actually put it here. Strategically, they're touching sponsored research because they actually do touch sponsored research, or they assist indirectly. And we'll talk about that as well. First things first, PIs, principal investigators, they're the ones who basically get the ideas. And so everyone in this process is an intricate, important, very necessary and needed part of the research administration process here. PIs, they get the ideas, they go out and they look for the funding and work on the proposals, and the colleges, the schools, the units, that some of you are in the functions of the positions to help those PIs when they go out and look for those awards or look for those opportunities for external funding, and they're preparing their proposals. So the colleges themselves, the individuals in the colleges and the units, they assist the PIs with managing their research, whether it's at the proposal stage or the middle part of setting up things for them so that they could actually get the research done, or helping to close it out. And then we have the Office of Research. And the Office of Research is overarching, because the Office of Research is not just sponsored research. There's internal research as well that goes on. And AU does fund internal research also. So when I say the Office of Research, there are other things happening in the Office of Research. But as a part of the Office of Research, you have OSARA, and OSARA is directly related to sponsored research. And so when it comes to the setting up the awards, managing it from a central aspect directly with sponsored research, that's where our OSARA comes in. And then you have the central service departments, and I call them central service departments because they are supporting research as well, but they are centrally located, meaning they provide their services to all of AU, not just sponsored research. And they're doing their functions, and a part of their functions still supports research. And that's going to be your HR departments, procurement, accounts payable, general counsel, the blue kind of departments that we talked about on the previous screen. I don't know why I pushed that button. Yep, okay. So who are we? We being OSARA, because we're kind of talking to you right now about this training. So this is the Office of Research and OSARA. And so we're giving the training for research administration, because we are the central office from an AU standpoint, supporting research administration. And so where you have the units, the individual units who are supporting research administration in their departments, we're supporting research administration across the university. And so when it comes to compliance to the organization, can we do this? Can't we do this? We're looking from an AU standpoint, right? And so Office of Research is headed by Diana Burley. She's a VP for Research and Innovation, and she's managing all of the Office of Research, right? And so that's this left side here, and me. So this is who I report to on the one side. Because then there's a whole nother side with the accounting team, right? So this side here is the OSAR. And so then, like I said earlier, there's an accounting side and a contractual side. And you can see in that, if you can remember the org chart where we had the red on this side, and then we had that other red bubble. Well, these are those bubbles. This is the red on the one side with the contractual team, and this is the red on the other side with the accounting team, right? And so welcome, Laura. Yay, very happy to have you. And so we are directly related to sponsored research. We are directly providing support service for the sponsored research community from a central administration standpoint. And so normally when you talk to us, we're thinking, can AU do this? When you're talking to someone in the units, you're thinking, can you do this from a CAS standpoint and an AU standpoint? Right? And so that's a lot to know. And so we don't expect you to be experts at it. The CAS part or the SPA part, yes, you want to be experts at your department. But you also want to be aware that outside of your department, AU has regulations, requirements, compliance aspects. The government has regulations, compliance aspects. And so we have so many things that we have to make sure are intact, that are okay, that are set while the research is happening. There's no way we can do it by ourselves, which is why I said everyone on all of those bubbles are important to this process, because it is a huge process. Right? And it's been good, and we're keeping it good. So who are you? Everybody. All of the schools, all of the units, all of the different colleges at the university. Department administrators are a huge function of the research administration platform here. And we talk to you more than anybody, right? And so whatever capacity you're in, whether you're at the beginning, you're at the end, you're in the middle, you're the whole process, because there are some units who, like, I'm pretty sure Mackenzie would be saying the whole part of this. If someone got when you get an award from the Office of Campus Life standpoint, depending on your department, how it's set up, how much support you have, how much funding comes in, you may have a team of research administrators. There may only be one. Okay. Together, as I've said several times, we are all sponsored research at American University, and we do really have to work as a team. And so what are we doing? We're performing research administration. That whole little bubble is what we're doing. And so that is actually the award life cycle. That is the part of the award that that is how research works, and that is everything that we're dealing with, quite honestly. It starts from where we talked about earlier with the idea, and having the idea is great. It's one thing. If we don't find funding, it's just an idea. If we stop at finding funding and we don't actually write a proposal to get that funding, or we don't get that funding in, because quite honestly, there are proposals that never have to go out the door. And from a conversation with someone, they'll say, oh, this is great. I really want to fund that. Let me send you $20,000. And depending on how they send it, what it says, the terms and conditions, because they send them in. If they don't send terms and conditions, it's not sponsored research, it's a donation, and we send that to the donation department development. But if they come back with terms and conditions, then that is sponsored research. And then all of this kicks off. We start going around this circle, and we may not have to prepare a proposal for that, but 9 times out of 10, a proposal is needed, right? And so that proposal gets created, submitted, the funding comes in with documentation to tell us what we have to do. And that's key. We're going to talk about that later, about why that matters. But the documentation telling us what we need to do, what our terms and conditions are, is when we go back and forth with the sponsor or the funder, and we may say, okay, we can do this part, but we can't do this, or our organization does not allow us to agree to this term, so we need to negotiate that out. And we do have to do that. But once we go through a negotiation and get everything set, then award gets approved. We set up the project, establish an account number, send that out. The faculty members, the researchers perform the work. You guys are helping with managing the award, or in this case, because Jake is actually on the pre-award team, Jake starts here. He starts with the actual the proposal part, in between the finding, funding, and a part of that as well, quite honestly, depending on what's needed when it comes to that phase, and then submitting the proposal. And then Jake kind of lets it go after the proposal is submitted, and he goes and he's continuing to work on to get more proposals out. All right. And so that's a huge lift, quite honestly, because the proposal is telling the individuals that we're asking to fund us, this is what we're planning to do. And they're funding us based on that proposal. So we can't get it in and then do something totally different. They're expecting us to do what we told them we would do in the beginning, which means the proposal phase is very important. And I must say, I probably will continue to say, I just said it yesterday, actually, CAS has an awesome proposal phase. The pre-award team there is fabulous. So I love it. And so the proposals, when they go out right, they come back in, it makes the job a whole lot easier. It facilitates it smooths the process on the back end, because it can get a little crazy if the proposal is not correct. Let's say it that way. But everything comes back in, we set the account number up, the work is performed, the award management happens, and that's from everybody's aspects. That's the red bubbles, the blue bubbles on the org chart. That's everyone gets involved when it comes to award management and performing the work. Invoicing and reporting. A part of this is where Laura is, the establishing the account, the setting up the project, invoicing and reporting, and the work closeout. We're all involved in all of these processes for the most part. So it's either one or the other, or everything, right? I know that's crazy. It's just like, then that's everything. But it just depends on where you are, what you're doing, what your main functions are, right? So I get to see all of it, which is yay, I get so excited. I can sign a proposal and see it come back in on the award side and see it close out, and we're done, and we can move all the way around the bubble. That doesn't always happen yet, but we'll see how we can facilitate that so everybody can see. So first part of the process, find funding. All right, and so the process begins when the PI goes out to do whatever means they go through to find funding. And there are several ways to do that. But the one thing we want to talk about before we talk about finding funding is who can actually be a PI, because everybody can't be a PI. Just because you are at the university does not mean you can be a PI on a research award or a sponsored research award. So we do have a PI eligibility policy. And for the most part, you have to be a full-time permanent faculty member to be eligible to be a PI. And so there are cases where there are cases or exemptions to this. And so if it's not a full-time permanent faculty member, then you go through a whole process through your department, through the Office of Research to get approval to be a PI, but typically it has to be a full-time permanent faculty member. Okay. Questions? Thoughts? And so when a PI or faculty member, the person who's responsible for making sure the work happens, who's performing the research, overseeing the research that's occurring, finds funding or looks for funding opportunities, they can go in several places. And so here are just some of the places that they can go. Grants.gov is one that most people are very familiar with because it shows all of the research opportunities from the government, not just one agency, but typically all of them, or the majority of them anyway. And so a lot of people go to grants.gov to look for funding, but that's not the only place. And so in the next slide, this slide and the next slide, you'll just see some different examples of places that some PIs go to find funding, right? And that's really what we want to do. We used to have a service that PIs could come to, and we could help them find funding. We haven't gotten back around to that yet, but we are hoping to be able to do that here in the near future, or in the future, maybe not in the next 6 months, but hopefully sometime within the next year or so. And so when the funding is found, or at least identified, then we kick off the process with proposal development, right? And so, like I said, we're only going to talk about these briefly, not because the next session is really going to talk about the proposal and all of those phases. But the proposal development phase of our little circles is intricate to getting that funding, right? It's great when you met somebody at a coffee shop and they decided to give you $50,000 to go and do your research award, but that's not normally how it happens. And so you do have to create a proposal, and it has to have key elements in it, information that's needed. Most of them are very strict or stringent. They tell you what you have to include in those proposals. And so this proposal development, this is the initial contact for some individuals, some PIs to the sponsor. And this is kind of like your resume, like, right? Like, let me tell you how awesome I am. So, and how I can help cure, I don't know, sleep apnea or whatever we're doing research on these days, which is just about everything. But you want to put your best foot forward, right? Because we want the sponsor to say, absolutely, this is a great research project. I would love to support. And so that's why the proposal development phase is very important. And it's the first part of us getting funding. So when we're looking at proposal development, we want to make sure that the proposals are based on the sponsor requirements, but they also follow the sponsor and AU policies and procedures. Sometimes sponsors have specific guidelines. Like I saw one, it had to be in 12-point font. You could only use Arial and I don't know, Cambria. I love Cambria, but but it was very specific, and it could only be 2 pages long and 8 paragraphs. I'm like, wow, okay. But we do have to make sure we're adhering to whatever those guidelines are, because if it doesn't, they will not look at it. And our goal is to capture their attention, their eye with our proposal, kind of much like a resume, right? I want to make sure my resume captures your attention so that I can get the job. And so maybe I'll put Mickey Mouse on the side of mine or something. I don't know, is that even possible? They may say copyright law or something, but anyway, something like that to capture attention so that they can say, yes, I want to fund you. And so the proposal has to include a budget. They have to know how much it's going to cost, right? You have to tell them how much you need to be paid. I mean, this is really looking, oh, wow, I'm going to use that. So the proposals are developed in assistance with the department administrators. So like Jake is a big part of the proposal development phase, and OSARA. And so they are also working with the contractual team in OSARA to get that proposal out and make sure everything is in line. And then it's further reviewed by OSARA. After everything is done and submitted, it gets submitted to OSARA. And then we look at a few other things just to make sure we're good. And so it's developed and then it's submitted, right? And so when it's submitted, it has to be reviewed by the department administrators. And that means it has to be reviewed and stamped. We need to know you saw it, but we need you to also stamp that you're good with it. And that's the approved piece by the dean or the dean designee. And so that's letting the dean know that this is what you're obligating us to. And so this is what your department is being obligated to. And we want to make sure you're okay with that. That's very important because sometimes we do have PIs who put all kinds of things in their proposals, right? They want to promise the world because they want to make sure, right, you're going to get the funding. But that's just like putting I'm a SQL developer on your resume and you've never seen SQL. We can't really promise the world. We need to make sure we're promising what we can actually do. And so we want to make sure we're agreeing to perform work we can actually perform. We also have PIs who will put cost share into their proposals and they will agree to pay for all kinds of stuff. And it's like, no, because cost share means the department is paying for it. The department needs to know that they're signing up to pay for something. And so that's why we have, all of these approvals in place to make sure everyone's aware. This is what we're agreeing to. Is this okay? This is what we're agreeing to, especially when it comes to department resources. All right. And then it's submitted to OSARA, and I put here at least 5 days prior to the due date. And that's big because if it's not submitted 5 days, at least 5 days before the due date, then when there are errors in it, then it can't, we don't have time to catch them. And that could be the difference between getting funding and not getting funding. And so we really do need to get to that 5-day mark. When I say CAS has an awesome pre-award team, they rarely, if ever, miss this mark. And I don't know how they do it. I'm going to ask them some questions in the next GAR because we need to be able to duplicate that across the university. I mean, I said it and it's on record. It is a fabulous process. But it really does help because we know we are going to get that proposal in on time and in enough time to review it so that it goes out. We've checked it, everything is good to go from an AU standpoint, from the sponsor standpoint, from the department, like everything is being checked. And we're not just rushing it out the door, right? And so then 9 times out of 10, if a proposal goes out the door, I've signed it. And we do include the solicitation, the budget, all of the information that goes along with the proposal. And so all of that gets submitted, reviewed, it's blessed, yay, goes out. So the type of proposals we have, there are 7. 7? Yeah, that's 7. You can have a solicited, meaning the sponsor actually put out information to request a proposal, or unsolicited, meaning they didn't, and we sent them something saying, we have a great idea. Would you like a proposal? We can send out sometimes a pre-proposal, which is like a letter that tells them, hey, I'm thinking about sending a proposal. I'm planning to send a proposal. What do you think about this? Sometimes it's a renewal. So we've already received the award. We're just sending out a proposal so that we can get the next increment of funds. Supplemental proposal is after the fact. And so it's based, well, not after the fact, but it's similar to a renewal where we're asking for additional increment as opposed to a whole new proposal. Consortium, we may work with another university, we may work with another agency on a proposal, and then limited submission. And limited submission is the sponsor has stated you can only one proposal can come. And so then we have to work within the whole organization so that we submit only one from one area. So those are really the types. And then everything that follows are just the definitions of what I just said, which I already went through. the definitions, just briefly, because I don't like to read slides. So those are there. They'll be in the deck for you to be able to read and go through at your leisure. But I really just did the overview of what those are. And so those are the types of proposals that we're dealing with. And so next, RAC, we're going to continue the pre-award conversation, talk about pre-award processing. We're going to dive into budgets, and those are always so fun. I mean, they are, because I love numbers. And so maybe it'll just be fun for me. And so for the next 2 RACs, we're going to talk about budgets because they're a big part of the proposal process. And then we'll go into post-award processing, and we'll go to post-award processing on the contractual side first. And then we'll go to the, after the award has been signed, and then we kind of flip the switch and go to award administration and the post-award process, and that happens there. Yay, us. That's what we have. So now I will open it up for questions and figure out how to